Welcome to Maverick Dreamers and Thinkers. I'm Chloe Cho. Do you have a goal in life? How do you envision your future and go about it? What if you had a radical plan to see the world and live in a different city every 6 months to understand and learn about the 10 countries that you believe will become the biggest economies within the next few decades? Such ambitious plans are difficult to realize, especially in your 20s, due to the lack of time and resources, but certainly wasn't the case for my guest today. Here's the story of one couple who went around the world in search of the next big ideas that promised to change the world. It helped that this young couple had the resources to execute their whirlwind adventure after going through a couple of startups, including a scrappy Swedish site that went on to become the biggest music streaming company, Spotify. Meet Lisa Enckell, a marketing and product development specialist, angel investor, and a partner of Antler, a startup generator, accelerator, and venture capital fund, as she shares the eclectic journey that took her and her husband, Andreas N., from Stockholm, Sweden, San Francisco, Jakarta, Indonesia, Berlin in Germany, to Mumbai, India, before they were forced to make a pit stop in Singapore. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Your journey around the world literally began more than just about 10 years ago. It starts in Stockholm, Sweden, San Francisco, at some point Singapore, and in between there are lots of cities.
Maybe it started when I graduated. I did my master's, and at that time, everyone else, they either went to banking or management consulting, and I felt, none of this is for me. This is not me. I don't want to do this. So I went to a small startup.
In Stockholm, Sweden.
Yeah. And it was just about to get started. And I started out just helping them as they were launching in Stockholm, did a bit of PR. For the record, so my boyfriend at the time, now husband, was one of the co-founders. And he was like, Lisa, you should just help us with this. But then it was the CEO who said, Lisa, I think you should join the team. And I said, no, that'll be awkward. I don't think I should. Eventually, it was just a bunch of friends. And we said, why not? I'll join the team.
Where does Spotify fit in? Because your husband, Andreas N., was the first employee and also the first CTO of Spotify.
Spotify started in 2006. Oh. So this was before that. So he had already left Spotify at the time. But because of that, we were in a very fortunate position where we had started doing angel investments. We were advising a couple of startups. We were, a lot of our friends started very exciting businesses, and we had opportunity to invest and to work with them in different ways. So we didn't need to go back to a traditional corporate job, but we had actually the freedom to do something crazy like we did. But that was a long time ago.
Oh, yes.
So things take time.
Yeah, so Spotify in Stockholm, Sweden, and then you guys cashed out, lucked out, and then you went to the US.
With the next startup called Wrap. So I joined that team, and just a couple of months later, maybe a year later, we actually moved and established in San Francisco. We got some US investors on board, and we did that very, typical startup journey that you've heard about. You had these famous investors coming on board. You moved to San Francisco. You set up an office there.
What was the business?
This was a new take on Groupon, if you remember that. So we allowed our users to share free gift cards to a bunch of different retailers. So we would work with Sephora, Victoria's Secret, Nike, those kind of retailers in the US, and I could send you free gift cards. You could go into Sephora, you could pick something up for $5, and then you could share this with all your friends. It was really like kind of viral mobile marketing back in 2011.
Were you guys before Groupon or after or around the same time?
This was after Groupon. Okay. So it was an evolution, inspired by Groupon, but Groupon was already big at the time. So this was more like, we thought it was a more fair model for the retailers, because all of the retailers had been burned by Groupon, and we said, well, there's something in this. There's something about doing something smart with mobile marketing for retailers, but the Groupon way is not it. So we thought we had a good kind of spin of that. And we did. It went well. We raised a ton of money. We grew to 18 markets. We expanded the teams. Things were good. But then eventually we realized that we had to make certain product pivots. Like we had to change the products. The retailers were asking for more data. We said, if we connect this with the credit cards, then we can actually see the transactions. So Sephora would know you came in with a $5 gift card, but then you returned 2 weeks later or a month later. Mm-hmm. And this was kind of the data we did not have. So we started working with all the credit card networks and MasterCard and Visa, American Express. And it was super exciting. They were really excited to work with us, but they were so slow. They had never been running this fast before. And for us, it was like it took forever. So I think that is a very common mistake for startups. They get very excited when these big corporates want to partner with them. But these big corporates, they have committees and they have meetings and they need approval. And in the same time, that this startup is running out of money. So it was very different timelines. So fast forward a couple of years, we actually ended up doing this big pivot and closed down all of the US operations. And the business went back to Sweden and focused on the Swedish market, where we had stronger connections and we actually could collaborate with some of these partners because the US ones were just too slow for what we had. And we didn't have that backing and patience to actually get something going with those corporates. And me and my husband, Andreas, we stayed in San Francisco and left the company at the time. It was more suitable for the Swedish team to take over. And we didn't really know what to do next. And that's kind of, I guess, when this journey starts. And he says, why don't we spend a couple of years learning about the world and living in different places? And living in San Francisco, you would think that's the center of the universe when it comes to technology and startups. But we had seen, this was in 2014, 2015, how a lot of these Bay Area companies were actually looking at China. They were looking at a lot of these products coming out of China and started to get inspired by them. And we said, we know nothing about what's going on in Asia, and especially not in the tech scene in Asia. So that's when we started. And we left and we moved to Jakarta, Indonesia.
You arrived in Jakarta. What happened?
It's a very global ecosystem startup. So when we got there, people were like, oh, amazing. People come here fresh off the boat from San Francisco. They want to get involved in the startup scene. So people were extremely welcoming. We met a lot of the investors. We met some accelerators. We were speaking at events. We met a lot of the startups. So we did a lot of pro bono work for some of the startups and just sharing how we had worked with product development or data-driven marketing or even, strategies that we had seen from San Francisco. And some of that was new for the companies in Indonesia, but a lot of it was the same. We were shocked to see that even in Indonesia, that we thought was so far away, people were reading the same blogs, people were watching the same presentations on YouTube and spoke the very same startup language that we were used to from San Francisco. And people had offices that looked the same as in San Francisco. So we were pretty amazed with how similar things were, but we also felt that we actually could add a bit of value, and especially kind of with the wider perspective on things and a bit of network. So that was a fantastic experience.
Then why didn't you stay? Because oftentimes when I talk to people in the Indonesian tech scene, they boast the numbers, and the numbers are so huge. At least 100 million millennials, 90 million gamers, and the numbers just go on and on. A population of somewhere around 270 million.
No, it's amazing, and it's so much growth. And it's incredible. And it's probably one of, not only mine, but also if you look at a lot of the venture capitalists in Singapore, it's one of the favorite markets, right? No, but we had decided when we were still in San Francisco, we had a little bit of a framework where we said, why don't we live in 10 different countries? We spend 6 months in each country. And we spend 5 years of our lives doing this just to learn about the world and become a bit open-minded or broader and not being so focused on either Northern Europe or the US. So that was already the plan. What maybe was or was not the plan, it was kind of planned, was that I was pregnant at the time. So
the roaming couple had to put the brakes on their multi-city travel plans and flew into Singapore just 6 weeks before the baby's due date. They stayed for a couple of months before getting back on track to their next destination, Berlin.
The next city on the list was Berlin. And it was time for us to get to know Berlin and the startup ecosystem and the investors in Berlin. In Berlin, we were shocked because we came from Indonesia where we thought people were not so maybe data-driven in all of their decisions. And we thought we had a lot to, we could contribute a lot. And then we came to Berlin and we were like, people were extremely, those are the best, if you say performance marketers, I would say that I came across. So numbers driven, so focused. They knew exactly, like if you were to do Facebook advertising, and if I had been teaching sharing in Indonesia, how it's great to look at, conversion rates and how evaluate the quality of the traffic you get in Berlin, they were like, and I asked some basic questions, and they were like, well, what target audience are you talking about? We are running 22 different ads, kind of in the same type of them. We have different channels, we have different target audiences, different keywords. We know exactly to the cent what's converting, what's not converting, if it's worth to spend $2 more on that target group and $2 less on that target group. So that was pretty, to me, as a background in marketing, that was very amazing because I learned a lot, and I also saw that, wow, this is next level.
Yeah. So why did you leave Berlin if it was so mind-blowing and amazing and beautiful?
It was also according to the plan, right?
How did you come up with a master list?
We said we always want to live, I don't know if you feel that, but you kind of want to live in the future, not in the past. So we looked at the countries in the world and we said, what are the 10 countries that in 20 to 30 years from now will be the biggest economies and therefore going to matter the most in one sense? And Germany is one of them, Indonesia is one of them, and India was next.
After Berlin, 6 months, okay, you had a taste and then you took off for Mumbai.
So in Mumbai, we had a fantastic opportunity where we worked with 2 companies and we worked very hands-on. So I was the interim CMO for a startup there, and so while we worked there full-time, we didn't live there full-time. Versus in Berlin and Indonesia, we were there full-time, but we didn't really get engaged full-time with any company, but we met a lot of different ones. So at the time when we actually worked a lot in Mumbai, we were based here in Singapore.
I see.
And it was pros and cons, but we had a 1-year-old at the time, and he came with us twice to Mumbai, but then in between we were actually here in Singapore and took turns going to Mumbai. I think it was around that time we realized how convenient life could be. And we also felt like we had spent a lot of our time organizing travel, planning, figuring out how to meet a new pediatrician or getting a flu shot or vaccination in time for our son as we were traveling around. And we realized that here in Singapore, we actually don't need to deal with any of those logistics. And we can have a very convenient life, but then we can also be free to travel and to start doing other things.
So what was your key moment?
I mean, Mumbai is amazing, but when it's raining in Mumbai, it's raining in Mumbai, right? It's the monsoon, we're there, we're in a hotel room and just pouring down and we're running out of diapers. And we try to order diapers online, as you do, but all of these online apps where you can go shopping in India, you need an Indian phone number. And we were just using our international phone numbers. We did not have an Indian phone number, so we could not order diapers online. And I think around there was like, okay, it's to that. And it's like, who can focus on doing a good job on the one hand, if that's kind of what you need to deal with. So around that time, and when we kind of came back to Singapore, we said, actually, maybe we should just stay here and have full-time help to help us with the kids so we can focus on the things that we actually really enjoy doing.
So that was the pivotal moment. And then you had child number 2 in Singapore and you were already based in Singapore.
That's right. And I think now we still have those 7 countries on the list. So we'll see.
What are they?
So that would be Brazil, China, Japan, Mexico, probably UK. And we would like to go to a region like in the Middle East. There's not one country that would fit our list, but I think the region is super interesting, and then Africa as well. What we do now with Antler, I do have the opportunity to work with all of these places. So it's kind of, I'm still getting a lot of exposure and I'm learning a lot about all these places, which is kind of the end goal anyway.
34-year-old Lisa is a partner at Antler, a startup generator, accelerator, and an early-stage VC that's out to groom the next generation of startups and founders. Founded in Singapore in May 2018 by a group of tech veterans, including Lisa and her husband Andreas, who sits on the investment committee, Antler is supercharged for growth and disruption. In the past year and a half, Antler has generated 44 new tech startups in Southeast Asia and dispersed $2.4 million in investments. Globally, Antler has invested a total of $12 million in 120 companies and has set up offices in London, Amsterdam, Stockholm, Oslo, Nairobi, Sydney, New York, and plans to open up in Jakarta early next year. This is the interesting thing. You guys, in a sense, made it, right? At a young age, before 30. And how do you stay so driven, ambitious, and grounded?
I think we're just getting started. I think now we have an opportunity to build our own companies, to invest in other companies, to help other entrepreneurs. So I see it as we're just getting started. I really do. And so does Andreas. And I think we still have that urge and drive to build something and have impact.
I guess there's really a vision and you want to build something that's kind of much larger than what you are. And once you started getting familiar with the startup scene in Southeast Asia, i.e. particularly Singapore, which is seen sort of as the hub where you have all these unicorns, what were some of your impressions?
When we first came here, we came across quite a few times where angel investors were not that experienced. We thought, like in general, people were not so experienced on the investing side of things. So they would do an angel investment and take 40% of the company, which is very unheard of, both in Northern Europe and also in Silicon Valley, because if you do that, then the founders don't own a majority of the company, and that creates issue as they raise further funding, because those investors coming in later really wants the founders to have a majority of the company and have a big upside if things are going well, because it's going to be really, really tough. So if you then have a very passive angel investor, they typically want to clean up that cap table, and sometimes that even prevents company from raising further funding. And that's what we came across here in the beginning, and I think now things are changing a bit. I think it's always this supply and demand. Back in a couple of years ago, it was a bit maybe harder to find capital. Now a lot of capital is available. So capital needs to compete and have better terms for the entrepreneurs.
The other logic from the angel investors, from their perspective, would be if they end up getting 10%, 20%, 10%, which is what Antler does, then eventually as the startup grows, they get completely diluted as more funding comes in.
Absolutely. So you can either then invest more money later on, but I think you also need to recognize that if I take too big of a share now, I'm just going to prevent this company from succeeding if they want to do that typical VC kind of route. Of course, there are a couple of amazing companies where you had a seed round, an angel round, and then they start actually earning money, making money, and they don't need to raise further funding, which is also a likely outcome. But I think if you do the more traditional route, it's actually not very good for the companies if you have very big stakes that are owned by totally passive people who are not helping and who are not active in the company.
If you really believe that this founder and this company, this startup that they've created is going to do something amazing and really disrupt, provide solutions to a lot of complicated problems, then if you tick them off and he or she leaves, then the vision is gone. So who cares about the money that you plunk down and about your majority stake, because that company is really nothing without that vision, that visionary founder.
And typically if you have that kind of technology and that kind of vision, you would need further funding from pretty deep pockets. And usually that is, and if you have a very well-known venture capital firm, that kind of sends this signal that this company is actually on the right path and is doing something amazing. So it sends also a very strong signal to the market. But those well-known VC firms wouldn't invest in the companies where we would say where the ownership is skewed. Yeah.
You're getting into a lot of early stage startups in Singapore and beyond, putting down about $100,000. That usually gets dispersed within the first 2 months, right? Which is a pretty generous term, given that I don't think anybody's really handing out that much in such a short period of time. It usually takes 6 months, 1 year. What kind of startups are you looking for? Are you looking for the idea, the technology, or really is it about the founder or all of the above?
Between Kid 1 and 2, if you have my timeline, that's when I got to know Magnus Grimmeland and a group of people here, and we decided to start Antler. So Antler is what we call a startup generator or an early stage venture capital firm, but we have a different twist to it. So we would invite individuals who want to start companies, or sometimes we even push people when they've been working for a couple of years, and we say, hey, don't you want to start your own company? And they said, sure, but I don't know where I would start. And we say, well, we have a great platform. So what we do, among thousands of applicants, we select 100 individuals who come to us in our office, and they spend 2.5 months with us in a room where we have 99 other like-minded people who are also there because they do want to start and build a company. And we put these people together. We make sure that when we select the people, that we select a very good mix of people. We have people with various backgrounds and skills. So people who are really strong in building products, in technology, in marketing, in growth, in sales and finance. So we have a mixed bag of people. And typically they worked for 10 to 12 years when they come here. And they all have different experience of working for startups or a specific industry. They typically come from 15 to 30 different countries.
So you're not really looking for the 22-year-olds.
No.
These are more of the mature types who've been around the block. They know what they're getting into, and they also have quite a bit of industry experience in whatever they're trying to disrupt.
Absolutely. And of course, there is a mix. There might be one or two 22-year-olds, but that would be very rare because we look at the background, what they've done in the past, and that we have conviction that, you know, when it gets tough, it will be, that we'll still keep running. And then we work with them for 2.5 months, and they start working and refining their ideas. They all have different ideas, and they start teaming up in smaller teams and start validating and testing various ideas. And 2.5 months in, they would then present to our investment committee, and we decide what teams to invest in and what teams we actually have conviction and where we can back. And that's when we give them the 100K for 10% of the company, and then we continue helping them, and hopefully then other very smart, connected investors will appreciate what they do, also invest a little bit of money, or they start making money because they sell to corporates or other customers, and they can then start growing their teams and their companies.
You guys have very quickly grown. You have branch offices in what?
8. It's 8 cities where we run this program. So we are here in Singapore. We are in Sydney. We are in Stockholm, Amsterdam and London, and Oslo, Nairobi and New York. And we're actually going to start in Jakarta early next year. So in each of these cities, we run this program. And not all of them are as big as here in Singapore with 100 people. In Nairobi, it's only 40 people. But most of them are between 40 and 100 people. And that also provides a unique, I think, network of early stage founders, because it's very lonely to run your own startup. But here, spending 2.5 months with other people, you actually get very close friends who are in the same situation as you are and who you can call whenever and you can talk to, and who would be in the same mindset as you are and understand your challenges and what you're working on. And I think this is fairly unique what we do, that we do this on such a global level and that we also connect them with each other.
Once a person gets stuck in the startup scene, it's almost like a drug gang or something, like the mafia. I guess the adrenaline is so high. Is it addictive? One could argue that you guys made your money. Hey, you can just, go retire in the Bahamas or something.
Yeah, maybe we should. I would find that boring. I get a lot of energy from working with these founders. They are super smart, super driven. And then if you can help them a bit, and they are super helpful for that, and you see when you introduce two people, magic happens. That is probably the best job you can ever have, right? And you have a very good and clear impact. And all of the founders that come to us, they do want to change the world in different ways. They see that they want to fix the environment. They want to fix the way foreign workers are treated. They want to fix trade that is inefficient. It's big problems that these people take on. And if some of these succeed, we're going to have a better world, and we're going to have a lot of value created. I couldn't find a better place to be honest. It's extremely inspiring.
When your first big passion goes big, you sort of make your money. How does that feel? Is that a curse or a blessing?
Everyone treated that a bit differently. I guess what Spotify did great was that a lot of the early employees did get a bit of equity, right? And some sold it off early, some kept it until the IPO, and the IPO only happened last year. But I think that is a lottery ticket in many ways. People join a startup, they work for 5 years.
They kill themselves.
They work really, really hard, and it may or may not take off. And sometimes you just end up being in that right timing with the right team, and it goes really, really well. And then it's that kind of lottery ticket. And you're, of course, more likely to grab one of those if you're based in the Bay Area. But I think Stockholm is also one of those places where a lot of startups have gone very well.
So what did you guys do? Did you hold on to it until the IPO or sell?
We did a little bit of both.
Oh, very good. Having had this experience, by the age of early 30s, You guys sort of become the mentors, angel investors, tech gurus.
Yeah, you could say.
I find you really inspiring because here you are, a very beautiful woman, 34 years old, 2 kids, a husband. I mean, you seem to have found that perfect balance. You seem to be heavily involved. You are pushing boundaries. How do you keep it all together? It takes time to figure these things out, in my view. And I'm still figuring it out.
Andreas and I, we are a team, at home, and we've always worked together. So when we look at our private angel investments, we always do that together. When we think ahead and what to do, we do that together as a team. And that's, of course, extremely helpful. And he's very hands-on with the kids, with everything family related, more so than I am right now because of my involvement with how much I do with Antler at the moment. So that is key. And secondly, I think we are in a very lucky, we got that lottery ticket early on, and we're in the position where we can have help at home. I would not be able to be here if that wasn't the case. Parenting, it's so hard, actually. And you can say that I'm in a very fortunate and great position, yes, but still, at the end of the day, it's still a lot of challenges to try to figure out. So I'm still trying to figure things out. But I guess it's just kind of that inner drive to keep going and seeing opportunities and stepping on the right stones and try to keep improving, keep learning. Be curious.
You're super duper passionate about growing the next generation of startups using your resources, using your global network. Where do you see this going?
It would be amazing if we could have this default platform. There's no kind of default platform. If you as an individual want to start your own startup, you're kind of left alone and you're left to you figuring it out yourself. Like the long-term vision with Antler is to be that default choice. And I think we can be in just a few years from now. All over the world, there is a place where entrepreneurs can come together. And I really think the strong network we are building is between peer founders and having that strong network of people and startups from many places in the world collaborating and working together. And I think this is going to be a massive way disrupting big corporations. Because I think they are, all of these startups are kind of in the same boat and there's so much happening and they all work on a global scale. And this is what is unique about startups, that you have a few people writing code and they create a product and then you don't need to have one employee per 10 new customers, but those few people can actually build a product that millions and millions of people can use.
As heavily involved as you are in the tech scene, what do you think is going to be the next disruptor? What industry do you think that'll take place?
We actually see a lot of corporates now. It can be banks, it can be any big corporates actually, in agriculture, in insurance, and so forth. They've all tried to have innovation labs or in-house incubators where they try to hire people or they take a few employees and let them do something startup-y. And they have a few beanbags and they have some whiteboards and then they think they're a startup and they try to innovate, but they're still kind of stuck in the corporate environment. And it's been proven to be very, very hard for them to actually innovate and do something unique. We meet a lot of these corporates who say, actually, it makes much more sense for us to just invest in some of the startups that you are building. And maybe some of them are even coming here with their problems. And they say, we need people to work on the following problems that we've seen in the insurance industry. And then the founders in our program can get inspired by that. And they have a sparring partner in these big corporates. I think the corporates are now, it's really ripe. They realize that if we don't take action and work with these startups, they're just going to surpass us and disrupt us. So I think a lot of things are happening now. And I think the corporates who will manage to collaborate and invest in the right type of startups, they will survive. And I think we're going to see a lot of change in the coming years because I think there is so much legacy. Some of the banks, their core banking system runs code from the 60s. They now have a problem because those developers are retiring and no younger developers have learned those systems, right? So that's just super tough for them to change and do anything. So of course you're going to have more startups that run much faster and who are able to develop and do things that the consumers want.
That's Lisa sounding the alarm for big corporations as the wave of disruption continues to upend the status quo. With 7 more cities still remaining in the master game plan, it's without a question that Lisa and Andreas' global adventure is far from over. Hope you enjoyed Lisa's perspective and passion as she continues her startup journey. Thank you so much for tuning in to Maverick Dreamers and Thinkers. Do subscribe and give us a quick review. If you're on social media, do reach out and share what you think of the podcast. Stay tuned for another fascinating episode next week. To all the great dreamers out there, I'm Chloe Cho. Thank you so much and take care.